Welcome back to DigiMarCon 2023. I have Miss Susan over here.
Yes.
Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I looked at your LinkedIn. You're on Vixen. I forget the name of it.
Vixen Labs, and then I'm also co-founder of Pragmatic Digital. So yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I know we were chatting earlier about AI, and that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that.
Absolutely.
And then you had a presentation on conversational AI.
I did.
So I like to form these conversations as kind of like the pain points that brands and clients have, and ultimately what we do to kind of ease up those pain points. So talk me through what the pain points you've seen around conversational AI and what you do to kind of help resolve it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the first things, and this is definitely, I have. It's a double-edged sword when it comes to these large models. They can be incredibly intimidating. They can also be perceived as silver bullets that are going to solve all the things. And I think that's one of the pain points that then is felt by external audiences because they're like, what is this thing? Or it's put towards them. So I think what we help them do, what we help all of our clients do, is be able to figure out, what is that important pain point that we can solve using conversational AI or voice or any of those types of experiences? Because the reality is it's not every experience. Obviously, one of the low-hanging fruit is easily customer service, because at 2 a.m. is finally when I'm getting around, or I have that thought and I want something available to me. There's a way to be able to do that without having to have 24/7 coverage by actual humans. There's ways of augmenting and enhancing that.
Yeah.
So I think more than anything, we've seen statistical data that shows that people use voice. So what we're trying to help people do is use voice and conversational AI brands so that can be where the people are.
Sure.
And being able to then solve those questions and those information needs.
And what's wild about the AI, I guess, it's kind of been pushed out there into the wild, and how much we're using it. Like I think earlier we were talking about ChatGPT, but just moments ago you talked about, was it Domino's, Bank of America, was it Audi as well? How they're using
Mercedes.
it? Mercedes.
Yeah.
Could you speak to some of like how they're using it?
Absolutely. So with what's interesting about Domino's is, so a lot of folks, we think about, when we hear voice, we think Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant. We think of that. Dom actually predates all of that technology, and they actually worked with a company called Nuance to create a way of making it easier for you to order. And when we talk about the things that people need or people want to be able to do, it wasn't necessarily like, I want to make it easy to get my pizza, just like how they did the tracker, and they've been known for all of their innovation. Like Mercedes took it from a level of command control has been around for a while. And that also predates any of the Amazon programs from that perspective. Give me directions, heat up for things. But what Mercedes was able to do in some of their lines was be able to add in an assistant that actually would intuitively understand command control. That would absolutely say, hey, where's the nearest gas station? And know that I shouldn't look 4 miles back. That's not viable. They're driving westbound. What's 4 miles ahead and westbound?
Yeah.
How do we have an assistant that's able to help me that way? Or, hey, Mercedes, what do I need to know today? What's the big headline today? How are we able to have those conversations and from an assistant perspective? And that makes a total sense in the idea of, here's my pizza delivery assistant. Here is my car assistant and those things. There are other instances where maybe you don't need to do a full-blown custom assistant. But again, how do I take my brand and translate that into the particular conversational AI or voice space that's meaningful, but also feels right for my brand?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I'm curious. So as far as where the application exists, some of these brands are well known. Domino's, Mercedes, Bank of America. But what's that cutoff point where it's like, okay, you know what? Conversational AI can be integrated into my brand as a tool, as a supplement to how we do business. What determines that?
What it comes down to is your priorities, right?
Really?
So we use actually a discovery process. So there's 2 ways you can get at that. One is, hey, I think I have a very specific use case. How do I prototype that? How do I then do field research with it? How do I refine that or make sure that this works? Because we still at times are asking questions like, can I? Is the technology there? And is the technology there and reliable enough?
Sure,
Because
sure.
that's tolerances every day drop a little bit more about how long you're willing to wait to hear it come back to you, or how long you're waiting for an answer. So that's one side of it from a prototyping perspective. From a discovery perspective, we'll look at it holistically, because as I was saying before, your information needs, just because I'm talking to a bot or I'm talking to my phone, that doesn't change.
Yeah.
Then when I'm in a store and I need to know how big is this or
That's
what's
a good way to
that
look at it,
size.
yeah.
So it's how do we deliver? What are the things that are going to help? And then we go through a process of stakeholder interviews, because the other side of it, it's not just our external audiences that live with these things, it's the internal people who have to support it.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure that those folks are there? We basically do a discovery process of understanding that.
Yeah.
Then we create recommendations and roadmaps based on that. And we have some prioritization workshops that we do together that help with like feasibility, viability, and also just general effort.
Yeah.
Is this actually something that your team can support? If not, let's think of another way. And that's also where we look at crawl, walk, run at times. And other times it's we're jumping out of, get the parachute. We're going all in. And those are other ways, but you still have to have an intentional path forward. So that's a lot of what we help with.
It's very interesting. Now, you mentioned having kind of like the internal stakeholders ready.
Yeah.
I guess in a manner of speaking, be ready. But who owns that?
So it depends. Sometimes it's customer experience. Sometimes it's an innovation team. Sometimes it's marketing. Sometimes it's all of them. And that's also where, so we use stakeholder interviews as an incredibly helpful way to understand the challenges that are within the organization. Are you guys siloed? Do you have content geniuses in this spot about this topic and this topic? How do we unlock that? How do we get that there? But then the other side of that too is like who owns it. Sometimes it's one group, sometimes it's all of them.
Yeah.
And then by talking to them, you're able to give them ownership, and you also get an understanding of sometimes the politics or the resistance. Like I've talked with teams where it's like they're like, no, we hate it. Like, well, why do you hate conversational AI?
Skynet.
Well, I tried it once and it didn't work. Or we did a thing and we broke it and we shut it down because it was like abject failure. Or why was it an abject failure? Oh, because unfortunately, whomever they were working with, and this isn't throwing shade, but the facts are, it wasn't the thing that audiences wanted.
Well, the expectation was a little bit
Or
different.
they never drove anyone to it. Like that's
Interesting.
the big challenge of, like I said, if they don't know it exists, they won't go to it.
Yeah.
So we're marketers, we're smart.
Yeah.
We know how to drive people places. Make sure that they use that, and they know it's available to them.
It's very interesting. So you brought up, well, you mentioned different stakeholders owning it. Now, I'm an SEOer, right? So in SEO, I think there's this idea. There's that question that comes up as well. It's who owns SEO?
Oh gosh, yeah.
Tech, content, marketing. But you also mentioned right before we hit play that content plays a huge role into all of this.
Yeah.
And content and SEO they hold their hand in hand. So talk to me. How does content play a role in all this?
So the whole fact is like the content. Like I said, information needs don't change. So you still need content. You can have fabulous infrastructure ever, but if it's not the right content, it won't work.
Right.
If you don't have any content, it won't work. I mean, that's one of the big challenges with ChatGPT that people are realizing is it good content? Yeah, I got content, but is it worth using? So content's very much important. And especially when you don't have, I was talking to a content strategy friend of mine. If in a voice only experience, I don't have visuals to bail my ass. Can I say that?
You're fine.
But I don't have a way that I can just say, oh, look at this picture. It'll help you understand.
Yeah.
I have to be able to knowingly understand how to articulate that.
Yeah.
Or if I do have an image, how do I use that to enhance?
Yeah.
And that's where we talk about that pyramid of solving for voice only and then basically moving out progressively. If we're able to pinpoint to that, that's where, and how I do that is going to be content.
Yeah.
It just looks different because it sound, sometimes it's text because it's a chat bot or it's a WhatsApp. But like the reality of it all is that it's the right information to the right audience at the right time.
Sure.
Well, that's content. So,
And this is publicly accessible content. So
Yeah.
customer facing,
yes.
indexable.
Absolutely.
Cool.
And that's also then like from an SEO perspective and wholeheartedly is there's this whole notion of voice SEO or conversational search. And reality is if you don't have your SEO, your traditional SEO right, voice SEO isn't going to help you.
I imagine the output is only reflective of the input.
Exactly. And so you can build upon that, and that's the idea of looking at the conversations had around your topics, around your brands. Owning, knowledge graphs are a great way of knowing if you're nailing it. Answer boxes, all of your rankings. That's all information that's telling you if you're doing a good job of being discoverable. And also, like when it comes to like a Google Assistant, that's what they serve.
Oh.
Right. So if it's those will be the answers it chooses. And when we talk about position 0, because typically there's only one answer given, that's where then that comes into play. So like SEO content, good content, that's where that's important. But you're answering questions. You're not just like, think about how you ask a question, like how you just asked me that question. There's a lot more words than if you were typing.
Oh yeah.
And that's okay.
I mean, we just in that regard. I mean, we had a whole conversation that led up to that.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of context behind it.
Exactly.
So I'm curious. So content is heavy, which makes sense. I mean, content is king. Schema. How much does schema play a role in this?
Absolutely. Featured snippets, schema, all that. If you don't have that right, then you're not going to get position 0. Like if you don't have, again, like if you don't have your basics and you're not winning at that, suddenly adding is not going to fix that either. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things too. Like as I was saying about conversational AI, if you don't have the problem sorted already, or you don't know that user, adding new tech isn't going to fix that.
That's a really good point. And I think I'm guilty of it.
Well,
I'm guilty of it. Yeah. Like, I mean, I own my own practice, so I'm trying to figure out like, how can I work better? Like, and then what can these fancy new tools help me? And then, none of it matters if the process isn't good.
Right. I mean, it's like it can be all these awesome things, but if like there's all these other parts to it, so it's hard to say if one group owns it, because if the tech isn't right and it's laggy, I've had situations where like I'm reading reviews and it's all mad at the tech that I don't have that I don't always have the ability to affect. Well, that's frustrating. And then there's other ones where it's like, well, it didn't understand me. All right, well, how do I train that better? Or it didn't answer this question. All right, well, I'm going to make sure we can answer that question if I see that come up more and more.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, again, we were talking earlier about just using Chat GPT.
Oh yeah, that too. Yeah.
I mean, just that alone. I know that's not conversational AI, but
it is, because the way you interact with it, you're asking those questions, those prompts, and those things, and there are ways that you can use that to fuel your conversational experiences. Like I love to say that we're all going to live off one big happy family of a large language model. That's not going to be the case. We're going to have owned systems, owned models. Why? Because that's what my brand uses. Or if I'm using regulatory and I'm in healthcare, I'm going to have to use a specific type, because how am I going to even get it to recognize medical terminology that is not a layman's term and things like that? So we do have to work that way in using those things. And that's where those large language models and all of the technology behind things like ChatGPT are able to help us move, like kind of leapfrog ahead. And instead of having to constantly go back and say, oh, that's the word, or that's the word. If we have ways of putting that technology and fine tuning that, then the natural language processing gets that much more powerful and much more responsive.
Interesting. I mean, again, earlier I mentioned like, just a few months ago, I was like, ChatGPT, it's not going to do it. It's not going to be a game changer. But you know what? It won't drive. I feel like it won't drive strategy. It supplement strategy.
It's absolutely, because it's like I think, and I think it was the conversation we were having about it's what you ask.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's way back when, if we remember, who was really good at Googling. Even a joke that, SQL developers, it isn't so much that they know everything, it's just they know how to Google really well. Right now we're living in a time period where how I use that tool, what I ask it to do, the parameters I give it, those are going to be, a better result. And that's also kind of part of that whole, that's kind of like, we almost get to feel what our users feel like, of like, what am I asking? How do I ask that to get what I want?
It's very interesting feedback.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's wild. Well, any other closing comments? This has been great.
No, this has been great. I appreciate being on. It's been great having the conversations between everything from ChatGPT, which, I mean, it's an interesting creature. A lot of companies are still figuring it out.
Yeah.
But it's opened up a lot of the conversations about AI. I think I've heard AI mentioned 100 times. And the hype this morning as I was like sitting there going, as I was going to do my talk, I'm like, all right, this is definitely setting the bar. But it's exciting to be able to do those things and to look at it. But I have a saying that wizards are for Hogwarts. And the idea of sometimes when new technology comes out, and I even remember my digital, like when I worked on website or when I worked on mobile, there was a tendency to kind of guru it back and be like that all-knowing wizard. And the reality is a lot of what's going to make these experiences better is the fact that you got to do some of your basics. You got to know, you got to know your user audience. You got to know that. So it's not as intimidating. Yes, there are parts that are really complex, but there's people who can help.
Sure.
And that's the important thing of like, you're not on it alone, and you're also not going in completely clueless.
Yeah.
If you know your audience, there's ways that you can use it.
And going back to your point, crawl, walk, run.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much.